Okay, so as you can see, what we've done, we just painted up some black for the chaff launchers. We've done a little bit of detailed painting in here, literally just black, and some wiring around the boxes. We've done down in this one here, the battery's blue, covers black, bits and pieces just like that. We're adding a little bit more wiring in there, but obviously we don't want to get that painty. So those types of things. So we just touched up a little bit. We've done the hydraulic cooler at the back has been done black as well, just like that. So we're pretty much getting there with that. Now we have the choice to build some sound filters for this or not to do it, with to do it. Unfortunately, I was actually waiting for a company to make some sound filters for it, but it looks like they're not going to happen now. And obviously we don't want to hang around too much, so it'd be two choices. We can either scratch build it, or we can just use the kit part ones for the sort of European theatre, and it's the cone ones that go over the end like that. So we'll probably end up putting those on for the moment and have it as a loose fit, so at a later date we could add sound filters to it. The other little thing we've got to build on here is the infrared disruptor. Now the thing with that, what we've actually got here, I've scratch built one and it's been sprayed. What we've got, clear piece of sprue just flattened down to make it into a semicircle and glued on, and then we've just got a piece of plastic card at the back to be the back part, a piece of sprue which we squared off, which makes the top little rail as it is back here. And what we've actually done here, we've sprayed the entire thing, the olive drab, so it's just the same as this one, so it's going to fit on here. Now all we have to do now is, we'll probably use a cocktail stick, is just to clean off the actual paint on there. So all we're going to do is just gently scrape through, and then hopefully the glass part will still show through. Now, so I'm doing this freehand, as you can see. Let me just pull that off the back. So all we'll do, we'll just come around the side slightly. Okay, just up like that. Flip over to the other side, scraping up and down, just like this. Then what we can do, we'll put some clear blues and colours over it to give us our effect. But there we go, you can see that's with the clear bit. For that then, we'll click up onto the side here, we'll glue it into position. There again, we'll use a little bit of wire just to loop around, so we'll place a hole for it to go through. But we just tidied that up and make sure we got them the right width apart, so we just need to bring this one a little bit more further down, and then as I say, using the clear colours like the oranges and things like that, we can actually put it on. But there we go, you can see the white in the background a bit like that, so the colours show through quite brightly. So as I say, that will go on, and then that bit's done. Right, so we've got some other bits going on at the moment. What we're actually doing now is bringing these assemblies together. Now down here at the back you can see this exhaust stack, which isn't actually glued in, it's just fitted in. We wiggle it out. Now this I did using a little bit of brass and a little bit of copper. These are the buffable ones which you actually put on and can just buff them, but anything really will do. Now with those colours I might change them a little bit and just make them a little bit more brassified, because when you look at them they're sort of copper brassy colour, different lights, different shades. So at the moment, sorry, this is in the brass, but I might change it to a little bit of copper, give it a sort of deeper type of colour. But they literally are a push fit straight in the back just like that. So if we turn around, I can show you what we've done. At the moment we've got the standard sort of European theatre filter on there. We could change this at any point to put the sand filter on, but as I said, had real trouble getting hold of the company who are going to be manufacturing these. They're a little bit slow on the intake of emails and things like that, so we've had to push forward and put the standard ones on for the moment, but later on we could change that for a sand filter to put that straight on. All we've gone is go around and detailed a little bit of the paintwork on there. On this side you can see we've got the actual the infrared jammer for heat-seeking missiles that come up. Obviously it's got the light. Now we've got one just here. Literally, as I said, we cleaned off the area, and then all I've done is a little bit of clear orange and clear green just to give it that speckly effect, and then all that does is super glue on. Now at the same time, as you can probably see on it, we've put in a little bit of cabling just down the back. I've got to do a little bit of paint touch-ups just to touch them in and do them. We're going to put a little bit of cabling just on the actual flare launcher here. We've got to do some cabling work, which will just be the lead wire. Just like this, we'll come around just to loop them out. Same for the little brake line on the main gear and those bits and pieces like that. So that's on and done. We've also made the holes for the actual hydraulic lines and the control lines to come off for the front winch here. That's another point that we've actually got on with and done those. Now I'm going to put the cables on yet, because we're going to weather this with a mixture of dry brushing, and then we're going to go around with you know, actually the sand wash, using it in the pump system to completely cover it and all the rest of it. So this is what we're really doing is going around detailing those bits up. As I say, we've got all the bits detailed and painted up in the front here and everything else. The other thing I've done is the rotors as well, which we've been dry brushing those. Pretty standard technique of the dry brushing, just take most of it off first, and then literally you can just go round, lots of dry brushing and let it build up. Don't put too much paint actually on your brush, just nice little technique, and dry brush those and we can get them in. So to give us our sort of first look, if you like, obviously we've got one rotor head goes in up here, and we've got the second just like that. So what it is, what we can do now, I'm not going to put the wheels on yet because we're going to need in there to clean them up. I'm not going to put the guns and all the little fiddly bits just in there quite now, because obviously when we go around with the wash we need to sort of get good access to all those areas, if you like. So what we can actually do is put on this rear intake cover like that. Now it does come with a piece at the back, but I have found it's a nightmare fit to get that in. So all I do is come along and don't have your blade out too long like that, and all we're going to do is chop that off just like so, and then off the other, and it's a thick piece of plastic. Then all we do with a nice rough file, we just cut through that, and then using a little bit of super glue, because I find it's the quickest way to do it if I'm honest, we just put a drop on this back part here and on the back. Don't go overboard with it. Okay, and then simply we'll just come in and fit this into position. Now the reason for using super glue will be quite clear. We've got to make sure they're facing forward and they're all flat. But then if you get your cocktail stick and just run it down the joint to drag the super glue with it, so we're doing it somewhat like this, okay? Come along with your kicker, give it a squirt, quick blow, and it will go white, as you can probably see in there. But the thing with it is then we can just paint straight over that bit, and it makes a seamless join for those two going on. And then literally for the filter that's going to go over the front. Now these filters, talking about them, it gives you a template to cut them out. Personally, what I did, get the whole thing, place it over, put a corner into the end, put it down, super glue the nose, so put a drop of glue in the front part and at the back, and then trim to cut each one and just go around that. It saves all this flapping around of making a template and trying to get it to sit in. That way you can do it nice and quick. And if you use a little bit of kicker, you don't have to hold it for too long, bits and pieces like that. So all we do, we just come along, blob of super glue in the rear, and to be honest that's too much, so if you use a cotton bud just to suck some out. Just like that. A little bit before I stick it to something. And then all we do, this one just pokes straight on an end. Okay, make sure you're nice and square. But it's all sat in there and looking square, because that's your main thing. And there we go. Release. And that's your filter put on there, just like that. Pretty straightforward. Then, as I say, if you get upturned pot, a little bit of the green we're using, which is this is the dark green Valero that we use for the fuselage, the 016. Come along with your paintbrush, just a small brush, okay, and just flood the particular area, and then just pull it around, and there we go. That makes for a very nice seamless little join going on back there, and we're all happy with how they're sitting and they're laid out, so we're okay with that. So the next thing we'll do is clean this off. If you keep your tops of your lids just done like that, it's quite a handy little thing. But keep our lids on. So obviously we've got lots of aerials, especially to go on the underside and all the bits and the doors and things like that, but we've picked out all those major areas. So what we're going to do now is going to get a flat coat on the go, and we want it to be nice and rough, so all the weathering will stick to it and the dry brushing will stick to it as well, and give it sort of that dirty, dusty, dead flat finish. Now for that I'm going to use extra acrylics, which is hand stuff, which is their water-based varnish. give it a good shake to get things going, okay? And then we're going to leave it just for a few minutes, just for the big lumps to settle down to the bottom. In the meantime, we'll just get the compressor fired up. And you want as much air pressure as you could possibly get out of your actual your compressor itself. So if you've got a compressor that can only perhaps cope with you know, say something like 25 psi, you really need it to be up really about 30-35 psi to blow the big bits out of this. And obviously the other thing as well, if you're going to be using something like a very fine needle, something like a 0.15, probably a little bit too small, stick to sort of 0.2 mil and above for this type of thing. So all we do, have trouble getting the lid off here. Okay, which is that good. We've left half of it behind. Okay, so we're just going to very slowly pour this into the colour cup. And the slower you pour it, the better, because that way if you get a big lump go in there, you can see it go in. But there we go, that's neat. Okay, and then all we're going to do, make sure your surface is clean. Okay, just quick airy passes. Okay, you'll probably see it start to lighten up and look flat as well. But if you've got white lumps coming out, turn your air pressure up even higher. But you can see already it's lightening up. So we'll just dry that back. The other thing as well, when you're spraying it neat like this to get a dead flat finish, don't think it's dry when you touch it. Chances are it will be a little bit damp still, and you can leave a fingerprint in it. So we just put another one over here. And we're just trying to cut it completely off. Now every now and again check your needle is nice and clear, and that way you won't get any spitty lumps. Just like that. So we'll just do round the rear. If I just grab it in the porthole. And the front. Just running down under the bottom. Okay, that's done. We'll leave that to one side, and then same with the rotors. We dry brush them, but it will just give it something a little bit more. We'll just do the undersides for the minute. But as I say, this is giving us a nice rough texture for everything to stick to. You can probably see already that's going pretty flat. And we'll just pop round with another one now, just to keep it flattened all off nicely. Just in through the rear. Okay, and we just do this rear cargo ramp as well, but obviously isn't fixed on yet. There we go. So we just let that dry off for about, I don't know, about 20 minutes, half an hour, because I want it to be totally dry. And then we can come back then and we can do some dry brushing to really bring out the details before the wash goes on. Right, so this has been totally drying all off. We've got all the little bits and pieces on there, just like that. So what we can actually do now is go around and do the dry brushing. Now with all dry brushing, there's three things to remember. Firstly is the colour that you're going to be using on it. Obviously you don't want to go with anything too strong differences. I always stay away from blacks and whites especially. I don't like to use silver apart from in cockpits if you want to give that scraped type of effect. Perhaps you know, on something like this you could do around the back here where obviously you've got hoses and things like that. A bit of dry brushing in silver never hurt there, but certainly for exteriors because it's too sharp. Obviously as well, the other thing to remember is the paint that you'll be using, normally from my point of view would be an acrylic, the tiniest flecks, and that's what they are, little flakes of paint. that's what will be sticking out, and they go everywhere and they flick around. I much prefer to use a grey, something like sort of a medium grey here. This is FS 231, which is sort of a midway sort of grey. It's a dirty grey rather than a light grey or a dirty grey. Next thing to remember is obviously your brush. Get it just out like that. The other thing to remember is your brush. Now I've got Old Faithful, so to speak, here. It's a brush I use for basically all these types of jobs. Things that it's not too hard, it's not too soft, it's just about right. The ends are pretty worn down and they're all roughly the same type of sort of height as well. It's quite thick. You can use flat brushes. The trouble I tend to find with flat brushes, they tend to hold too much paint near the top because I think they're sort of squashed the way they are. If you press down too heavy, it can actually you know, give a darker patch. But what you want to do, like here I've got a rogue hair poking out, we want to lose that, so we just give him a bit of a trim, just like those. Just get rid of the rogue ones. Next, you want a piece of kitchen towel with a rough textured surface, so it will scrape most of it away. So what you basically do, something like this, all I've got is the cap, roll the brush and load it totally up the entire length of it, not just the tips, everywhere. So by rolling it in the cap like that, you sort of load the brush up. Okay, and then literally over here, push heavily down right at the top to squash the paint out of it. Okay, and then we just go round absolutely everywhere and sort of circular motions to start with, just to make sure you've got any heavy areas of paint off. Then all we do is pushing down on the brush back and forth, just like this, just to offload, just like that. Then something, if you're doing it on black, you want to do the lightest of little touches. On here it's darker, we can get away with using a little bit heavier. But if we start around this cockpit area, all we're going to do is flicky movements. Okay, so there's hardly any sort of drag to it at all, so we're not scraping, it's literally just a quick flick as we go round. And we're not trying to, you know, turn things grey. All we're trying to do is give it a sort of dustiness look to it all. Okay, and any real high details, i.e. rivets around this cockpit area, will stand out a little bit, but this is a subtlety. You don't want this to be a massive thing where it's standing out quite a bit. Now obviously as the paint wears down on your brush, you can push a little bit harder, but don't over push it. You don't want to be in the situation where all of a sudden you've got a grey area or something like that. And then as soon as you're almost out of paint, you can really give it a scrape round, and I tend to do them all in areas. So for this one we've just done around the front parts around, but as I say, this is a subtle effect. You don't want any brush marks, it's just going to give an effect. Okay, so there we go round. It's one of those things, you're probably not going to pick it up too well on camera, to be honest. It's going to be one of those ones which is better to the eye. But what I'm going to do now is basically work everywhere by just dry brushing it and bring it up. Certainly things like corners on the chaff and flare dispensers, you want to wait until you've hardly got anything on your brush and then do them. If you do them when you've just loaded up your brush, because it's a real sharp area, it will scrape the paint off of the bristles and you'll be left with quite a bit. So for areas where you've got lots of standy up detail, do that with hardly any paint left on your brush. For all the other areas, when you've just started off, you've just loaded up the brush, keep somewhere flat, and then that way, you know, you're not going to be scraping it away, and away you go. So that will do. I'm going to dry brush the entire of this then. Okay, so the next thing we do is get on with the wash. Now, normally, as we say, you can just brush it on, take your bottle, give it a good old shake, on with the wash, and away you go. There's another way you can do it, is obviously you drop it in your airbrush and just spray it on. Or, we now do it in pump form. Exactly the same, apart from you get a spray nib basically, and then all you do is take it off and just spray your entire model with it, just like that, as I do. Okay, usual thing, give it a good old shake first, whip your cap off, point, test your spray. As I said, it will come out just like that. It's a nice spray, and then all you do is spray the entire model. Now obviously it's got somewhat of a finish and it's like going to repel, but what you want it to do is to naturally run down absolutely everywhere. So you want to flood your model with it. Now it's a little bit messy, but as you can see naturally here it's automatically pooling up in the areas as it would in real life. So all you do now is leave that to totally dry, do your other side and then move on, and then you can go for it. But what we're going to do now is just sprayed it on, took 20 seconds to do, leave it, walk away. Okay, so we do the other side, same thing, just spray it on just like so, and the best thing is to give this as much as you like. just over, and we're going to let this naturally drip and pool as it does in real life. So obviously it's all going to go down to the lower areas. As you can see here already, it's now, if we just bring you in a little bit, you can see it's actually going to all those natural areas as it does in real life, and that's the difference. If you used to be putting it on, you would have to put it in those areas, but as you can see, naturally it's going to go on there. As it dries, obviously it'll get lighter, and then we can come along and put coat after coat after coat onto it, and that's the great thing with it. But it is going to naturally go to all those areas it likes to do. The beauty of using it in the pump over airbrushing it is it does tend to keep it a little bit more centralized. If you're airbrushing, it tends to go a little bit further and gets in amongst all the bits and pieces and everything else like that. But what we're going to do now is going to give that half an hour to totally dry off. Right, so that's all totally dry. Now you want to be careful how you're handling this, because obviously we've got a couple of fingerprint marks down here already, because the oils on your hands or any sweatiness or moisture will wipe away the clay that's on there. So what we want to do now is just take off a little bit of the roughness and all the rest of it. If you want to get in between little dainty areas, best to use a cotton bud, and just basically all you're doing is sort of rubbing it in, just wearing it down just a little bit, just taking off any excess, and obviously you just build it up on the cotton bud. So these areas here where the wash has sat a little bit too much on top, the easiest way, if you just har on it, it's enough to get it to move without wetting it and start taking it too far off. So say a little bit of harring on there, just breathe on it a little bit. It will just help you to lift a tiny bits off, like that. And then obviously you can work away all around the things, and then don't forget you could just use it the standard way we do the wash anyway, and that's to come along, bit of kitchen towel, make it a little bit not moist, and give it a run over. But what we're going to do now is give it a rub over, and what will happen is obviously you're putting it onto here and it will just blend it all in and keep it quite soft. A quick way to stop your greases, so to speak, getting stuck to the model is to whip on a rubber glove. So we just pop one of them on, surgical, or if you have got the old velvet gloves, they're a nice way of doing it too. So all we'll do, we're just going to give it a gentle rub round, absolutely everywhere. Just to, obviously the other way it happens is it's sandblasting, so it'll be cleaning it as much as it makes it dirty as well. So we're just going to literally run around all the little areas and just taking off excesses. And what we've got back here, as you can see, is nice weathering patterns, and all I did was come along with the airbrush, and where it had pulled around these areas, just blow it through and wash it away. The same with down here. So all we do, we're just going to whip these off now. Quick point around the underside, a couple of wet bits. Now if you do get a situation like this is quite a nice one here. I don't know how we can see this, but you get these little bubbles, these little ripples happening, and it looks like the paint is physically like paint stripper on it. Literally all that is where the moisture has got into the paint and is lifting. Now as long as you don't rub that and scrape it away, it'll be absolutely fine. Give it sort of half an hour, come back, and that will go and it will be fine. You might have a little bit of raise, and over time it will go down and down and down until you can't see anything. So all we'll do, we're just going to keep giving Chinook here a good old rub all the way round. Then if you wanted to make little oily streaks, which is a great little technique for doing you know, hydraulic lines and things like that, a nice little way of doing it, people often say to me, how do you get it that actually stays there? If you get some vegetable oil, and then literally just run it in and then blow it and let it streak down naturally, gives great effective oil. It's something we'll do later on, probably in the finishing little touches. So all we're going to do, we're just going around all this, get that excess all off everywhere, and when we're happy how it's looking, and then the crew areas, obviously I've moistened a cotton bud on the top areas here. We just give them a bit of a rub around, save the cotton bud, just to clean them up a little bit. Give it some scuffing as if it's been used, really just like that. On this side. Yeah. There we go, we can just clean it up. And remember, this is doing it the other way. Normally if you was doing it with pastels, you'd have to chuck it all on and get it all off. This way we can literally just go around and get it all off, but it'll give us our nice heavy weathered look. Something just like that. So it gives us a nice weathering, looks dirty, all the rest of it, and we can move on. So how we can actually seal that in? Same thing again, compressor goes on, nice and high, let that pressure build. Back again with our varnish, which is our flat finish or matte coat. Okay, pour it in slowly again, making sure you've got no lumps. Okay, happy with the spray, and then literally all we're going to do is come along. Caught up here. There we go. We're just going to check our flow and literally just make some little passes. Now it will darken off, but it will lighten back up. But don't go in there spraying this in too heavy, otherwise you'll lose a lot of what you're trying to get. But as you can see, we're overspraying this now, and it's fine, it's still staying there. It's just going to tone it down a little bit, but because this is a lighter colour, it works in reverse to the normal. The dark wash, if you go over it, obviously it gets darker, but obviously this gets darker, and that's not quite what we're after. And there we go, that just does these. And if you find it's a little bit too strong for you in certain areas, just give it a little bit more flat over the top and it will knock it back a bit. Down some areas, just to flatten it all off a little bit. From the back, round the wheels, just like that. So there you go. As you can see, by overspraying it, it doesn't kill it off, and as that dries a little bit more, it will come back out again. Front. What we've got to do very carefully is hold the windows. We can just do the underside. And what we're going to do, we're going to give that an hour to totally dry off before we come back at it. So we've got a lot of little bits done here. What we've done is we've just painted up and detailed this interior bay here, which is obviously the refueling rig, which we scratch built and we did all those bits and pieces to. And as you see, you get a bit of paint on there, a bit of colour, just following the same. Got the picture that we had earlier, bits and pieces like that. We popped a gun in here, which we're just about to do to the other side, and I can show you what we can do. And also, if I've got a steady enough hand, you can see up here we've put the wiring and the hydraulic lines running up to the hoist. And as I say, it's got a little bit of shininess around it. That's a little bit of super glue. But what I'll do is I'll hand paint on some flat just to take care of that. In the meantime, as you might notice, the actual cockpit area is unmasked, that front bit, just to really have a look, and I wanted to see about that. Okay, running around the back, we've actually got a new line going down for the brakes, dead simple. Little hole at the top, goes through and just down to the bottom. A little bit close, let's back up a little bit. As I say, so really that's those bits done and taken care of, and just down here we've got the wiring for the actual flare and chaff pods there, that's in as well, so we can just do the same really to the other side. Right, so what we got here, just some flat black, just pouring it neat into the old colour cup straight from the bottle. We're not going to need much. We're doing here, all we've done, masked up the tail ramp. Now there's two vertical lines running down, and the cleats are obviously haven't got anti-slip on. Apart from that, everything else has got anti-slip. Nice high air pressure, and we're just going to spray in, and it's horribly and speckly, and normally you would hate it, but for this it is perfect, absolutely perfect. So we just spray that on. You can see it's pretty gritty. Back to air, just drying that back. Okay, just like so. We just tip paint back in the cup. Every drop helps, as much as we can get back in there. Okay, just unwind that. Put that in there. Flip that off. Now, being a bit careful because obviously it's still wet, we'll just whip off the rears, and then these should go down like this, and it should reveal our very nice walkway marks and various bits and pieces. I'll just whip those off, stick them down there. And there we go, there's our rear ramp actual area, which we can get fixed on here shortly. One of the last bits going on, so we can get that weathered up now, because obviously we need to weather it quite a bit, get that fixed in. We'll let that dry off, and then all we're going to do, same again, we'll just pump it with a little bit of weathering once that's dry onto there, dry brush over it, and we can fix that into place. So that's quite a straightforward job to do. It's one of those ones that you tend to have lying around to last, or I do. The next thing we can actually do is that we've got these windows. Now if you've done the same as me and you've put them in last, and you were probably thinking at the time, we've got to put the windows in, there is method in the old madness. because with any luck, fingers crossed, we clean them off and they'll just fit onto the outside and go in. Now there is a slight rim to it, which you can, if you want to, sand these off before you start to get them perfect on, but that rim, I'll tell you what, it's hardly anything and you wouldn't notice it, and they just push in just like that. As you can see, we've unmasked the front as well, so we're all looking really, really nice now. The thing is, what we need to do now is let this stand for a little bit, because we've got soft bits all over it with bits of things gluing and cables and that. We don't really want to knock them out, but it's just one of those things. So as I say, we'll get that weathered up just the same as we did the body and everything else. Lots of dry brushing, perhaps some little chunks and skates out of it, and then we can really get all the bits and pieces onto it.